Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda.
I must be a really easy mark, but you're very funny when you do that.
Thank you.
Hello, David, and welcome to our listeners. This is the Feeling Good podcast, and this is episode 370. We welcome everyone from around the world and throughout the galaxy.
And what's the date of publication of this sucker?
This is November 13th.
Ah, fantastic day, November 13th.
I'm
Why,
sure it's
you might ask.
Anniversary of something.
It's
must be
a
a holiday somewhere.
fantastic day because every day is fantastic.
Yeah, every day we're breathing.
Unless you feel like crap. But then you turn on the Feeling Good podcast so we can turn your crap into gold.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so let's turn some crap into gold today. I'm going to read this endorsement that Rekha sent you, and I believe Rekha is emailing you from India. And Rekha wrote about the podcast 181, which was live therapy with Sarah. Shrinks are human too. And Rekha wrote, that was a really good podcast. And the way you, Matt, and Rhonda worked with Sarah's emotions was great. I think many strong women can relate to Sarah. I remember how anxious I was during and after my babies were born. Juggling between work, family, and children is always hard for a woman. I loved the part in the podcast where Sarah used the 5 secrets of effective communication with her husband. Thanks, David, for everything you do. Rekha.
Thank you, Rekha. That's such a kind note. And shrinks are human too. That's for sure. Was that our podcast, Rhonda, with our Sarah, who at the time was in the Tuesday group, Sarah H?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was a darn good one. So
yeah,
thank
and
you
she was having a lot of physical effects like
weight loss.
Mina does, and GI problems.
Yeah, she'd lost like 25 pounds due to her anxiety was so bad.
Yeah. And I have to say that since doing that work with you, and she did some extra follow-up work with Matt, all of those symptoms are eliminated.
Oh, that's so neat. I just love that. I had a fantastic session. We're starting this with our app team. We're also working with Stephanie Haber, who's a television producer for Netflix. She had an Emmy award-winning show there, Love on the Spectrum. Now she's working with us to create some YouTube video programs based on actual therapy, like what we do on the podcast, except it'll be video and audio. And they'll be edited and made shorter and kind of little bit more, commercial approach, you might say, like just coming to the point and showing the highlights. But we had just a fantastic session with a young man who we recorded our first session. It was just me. I didn't have a co-therapist because it all came up at the last minute. But a young man in Europe who was he was crushingly severely depressed. And up at a level where you wouldn't hardly even see that on the Stanford psychiatric inpatient unit. It was so severe. Yeah. And I wasn't even sure it would be safe to have the session.
Oh, wow.
Because I didn't know any of this ahead of time. And he'd had chronic pain also, and some dangerous impulses. But he, by the end of the session, I mean, this was maybe the most blow away session I've ever had with anybody.
Really?
Yeah, it was. I mean, he not only everything went down to 0 or 1 or close to that, but he was catapulted like a rocket ship into orbit.
Wow.
I mean, into like full blown euphoria, and he's been on a real high ever since. That was about a week ago or something like that, and just a wonderful young man, and he's very intelligent and very good looking and well spoken, but he inside he was just dying, and he was hiding it from everybody, and he was so lonely. And I don't even know why I'm telling this, but it had something to do with something earlier.
Well, it's going to be on your TV channel.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. And so that might be something to look forward to. And then also today we're going to answer 6 questions really rapidly, and then we've got 2 that'll be full podcasts coming up. One on anger. We're going to do a full hour on a podcast on anger, which Jay asked for. And then we're also going to do a full hour on when therapy fails. Like we got a couple sad emails from people who've been working hard with no real changes. And so why is that? What's going on? What are the 10 or 15 reasons why people get stuck? And I think these are that, and the anger podcast will be probably incredibly interesting and relevant to just about everybody. So keep tuned. I think we've got some good juicy stuff coming up, but let's get on to our questions for today. Again, starting out with one by Joseph.
Okay. Well, Joseph asked you, how would you use exposure to confront your fear of ghosts? And I'm studying Spanish now, and the word for ghost in Spanish is fantasma. So how would you use exposure to confront your fear of phantasma? Hi, David. It's just an interesting word, phantasmas.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, David and Rhonda. Thank you again for your wonderful replies and the amazing Feeling Good podcast. If you would humor me, I have another question. I know David talked about exposure therapy and overcoming fears, but I wonder how this could apply to some fears like the fear of ghosts, where it is caused by an overactive imagination. And in that case, what should one be exposed to? Regards, Joseph.
Yeah. Well, again, I do not treat symptoms with techniques. I use team with everybody, because things often turn out to be evolve into something quite different from the initial description of the problem. But all that being said, I will answer this because there's a good answer to it, and then I'd like to get your take on it too, and we can take turns answering these questions first.
Okay.
But sometimes, I mean, it's such a neat and important question, really, Joseph, and you can use. There's many forms of exposure. One is called classical exposure. That's where you confront your fear in reality. Like one of my first fears I confronted was the fear of heights. And one of my instructors in high school, I had to get over my fear of heights to get on the Brigadoon, so I could work on the sets and something. I thought that would be fun. And he said, but we can't have any kids with the fear of heights. And I said, oh, but I've got the fear of heights. And I got it from my mother. I think she had it also. And so he had me stand on the top of about a 12-foot ladder out in the middle of the stage where there was nothing to grab onto. And he had me stand there about 15 minutes while he was just waiting at the bottom. And the whole time my anxiety was 100 on a scale of 0 to 100. And then all of a sudden, my anxiety disappeared. And that's exposure. And I think, Mr. Krishak, I think I'm cured now. and say, okay, come on down from the ladder and you can be on the stage crew of Brigadoon. And then I just loved going up to the ceiling and working the curtains and the lights. And I couldn't even figure out why I'd ever had a fear of heights. That's exposure therapy. Now, sometimes you can't confront your fear in reality like that because, like in the case of ghosts, it doesn't exist in reality. Or if you have a fear of airplane crashes, you can't go out and crash an airplane in order to get over your fear of an airplane
Right. Of course
crash.
not.
And so there's a lot of things that you can't confront in reality. And then you can use what I call cognitive exposure or cognitive flooding, where you imagine the thing that you're the most afraid of. And sometimes they're gruesome, horrifying things. And you instead of fighting it, you sit down and close your eyes and imagine it and make yourself as anxious as possible. And you can record the time every minute or two, and your anxiety level on 0 to 100. You can have a clipboard with you and take notes. I call it a flooding flow chart. And then you jot down what the pictures are in your mind, what you're afraid of. And the whole point of it is not to get over the anxiety, but to make it as bad as possible for as long as possible. And then eventually you'll come to a point where it just runs out of steam and disappears, just goes down to zero. And sometimes that'll happen within 60 seconds. Sometimes it might take 3 or 4 hours before it happens, but it will eventually happen. And that's called cognitive flooding. And I think it's a great tool because you can even go into the past with it and confront somebody who sexually abused you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's called memory rescripting, and maybe punish that person or have them arrested. You can do all kinds of things in fantasy that you couldn't do when you were a little person being hurt and exploited by some mean predator.
Right.
So
Well, I'm
that's my
thinking,
answer.
I love that answer. That's a really interesting answer and specific about how to work with cognitive flooding. And so I'm thinking about, where does a fear of ghosts come from, and and how you do exposure? Like perhaps there are.
Well, can I answer that first?
Okay.
Where the fear of ghosts comes from?
Okay.
Because it was came out in the current journal of on consulting and clinical psychology, which is the top top psychology research journal.
Oh.
And they have discovered that it originated in Milwaukee. And I just want to share that with you.
Oh, in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Well, I was well, yeah, Milwaukee, they have a lot of ghosts there.
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe somebody developed a fear of ghosts after somebody they love died. And so maybe being around death or dead things could cause intense anxiety. So maybe they need to be around, expose themselves to, going to a cemetery, maybe approaching.
Oh, yeah, that could be something. That's cool. I hadn't thought of that.
Or like approaching a scary abandoned house, or watching a scary movie about ghosts.
Yeah.
Or maybe the fear of ghosts is something connected to the fear of being in the dark, or being in the dark alone, or sleeping alone.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I'd wonder what else is attached to the fear of ghosts that you could expose yourself to.
Again, treat the human being and not the symptom. Find out what's going on in that person's life. And then we have so many techniques to treat anxiety too. That's another question that'll come up, so I won't answer it now. But exposure is not a treatment for anything, especially anxiety. However, it's a tool, an important tool in a treatment package where we have a lot of other ammo as well.
But that's a good point. Find out what's happening in that person's life, and then treat that person's symptoms, not just some abstract idea.
Yeah. Yep.
Okie dokie. All right, here's number 2 from Salim. And Salim asks, what herbs and supplements will help me become more zen and relaxed?
Well, there's a good answer to that, and it's fantastic too, because it can work in as little as 15 to 20 seconds, and that's a mega dose of vitamin C. What's the next question?
Really? Is that the next question? Is that your answer?
That was my attempt at humor.
Oh, okay. I'm
and
sorry.
and zaniness.
Okay. Normally I
Oh,
laugh
they
at your
didn't
zanies.
ask for zany, it asked for zen. I'm sorry, I didn't get it right. But
No, we want to take a supplement to relax and get into a Zen state that.
yeah. So what's herbs and supplements? I'll let you be the first to answer, and then I'll throw in my 2 cents afterwards. Oh, are you going to read the whole question?
I
Yeah.
thought I'd read the whole
Yeah,
question
good. Yeah.
because he writes, "Hello, Dr. David Burns. I want to
No,
tell
it
you that."
says Mr. David
Oh,
D.
Mr.
Burns.
David D. Burns. Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, Mr. David D. Burns. I know I did change. I edited it.
Thank
I
you.
just to elevate you.
Yeah.
I want to tell you that I loved your book, Feeling Good. Your book helped me a lot in improving my life. I do have a question. Can you recommend herbs or supplements that will help me be more zen and more relaxed? I would be eternally grateful. Thank you so much, Salim. So, every profession has its expertise. And Team CBT, our expertise is on changing the way you think so you can change the way you feel. And if you want information about vitamins or herbs or supplements, I would suggest that you find a professional who specializes in that, because I know it's out of you're a medical doctor, so maybe but it's out of my area of expertise. And I'm sure there are other people who would be able to give Salim more recommendations,
Well,
more
that's
valid.
a very, very conscious and excellent response. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mine is a little bit different. I used to do brain research on this exact topic.
Oh.
And when I was working at Penn doing my postdoctoral, post-residency research fellowship, we were studying this chemical imbalance theory of depression. And one of the ideas there was that L-tryptophan, if it would that goes into the blood from the stomach, and from the blood it goes into the brain, and then it's turned into serotonin. And the whole idea was that a deficiency of serotonin was the cause of depression. Serotonin was called the so-called happy chemical. But I was always suspicious of that theory and went in with some skepticism. And we did a beautiful research study on it at the VA hospital in Philadelphia on our depression research unit. And we gave half of the depressed veterans massive additional supplements of daily tryptophan. So we raised their brain serotonin levels by probably 50 times normal and kept this up. And then half the veterans didn't get the massive supplements of L-tryptophan. And after 3 or 4 weeks, we broke the code and looked at the changes in depression score. And there was no improvement in either group. And so we published an article in the top psychiatric journal, Archives of General Psychiatry, reporting that massive L-tryptophan supplements causing massive increases in brain serotonin had no effect whatsoever on improving depression. And it didn't, it was about as clear a disproof of that theory, that chemical imbalance theory, as you could have. But it took 30 years for people to catch up to us, and only recently have they finally published other studies saying that serotonin deficiency theory really has no credibility, but no good scientist believes it anymore. It's just not true. But to go back to the 1970s when we did that research, I then was contacted by Fernstrom and Wertman, who were researchers at MIT, because they were doing research on other amino acids and things that would presumably go into the brain and alleviate depression. And I even went and visited their lab at MIT, and they said they came to the same conclusion, that they hadn't found anything that has any meaningful effect on mood other than a placebo effect. And so my answer to your question is there are no herbs or supplements that have any value for any psychiatric condition. other than their placebo value. Now, the placebo effect can be considerable. You can get a 35% improvement in depression just taking a placebo, a sugar pill, something with no active ingredients. If you think it's an antidepressant, your mood will improve a lot. And so if you believe the hype of these health food stores and these people on the internet who are forever peddling their snake oil, whatever, and fish oil, whatever, that they're peddling, to my way of thinking, and I'll be my grumpy self if Rhonda gives me permission. It's just a bunch of horse shit. And and you can buy into it if you want, and join the cult, whatever the cult happens to be. But the data we have with the Feeling Good app and with our clinical work, that's real data using highly sensitive, reliable, and valid scales, and we're seeing rapid changes in mood in the majority of people. So I'd go with something that's real. All that being said, I don't expect any of the enthusiasts of their favorite vitamin or herb to be impressed with what I'm saying, and I'll probably get 3 or 4 people writing telling me I'm full of shit, but so be it.
And just a caveat, you have said before that schizophrenia, bipolar 1, those psychotic disorders do respond to medication.
Yes, but they wouldn't respond to
not to herbs.
Herbs, right. But that when people claim those things are responding to herbs and vitamins, they're frauds. There was a group in near Philadelphia called the Brain Bio Center, and they treated people with schizophrenia with massive doses of vitamins, and they had their own laboratory making up their own standards, and it was quite in vogue for a period of time, and for all I know still is. But again, to the best of my understanding as a researcher and scientist, there was no validity whatsoever, other than some kind of placebo effect combined with a bit of a come on from some salesperson that's trying to sell something to people who are sadly struggling with schizophrenia and psychotic conditions. And my heart goes out to people like that, because those are such severe and horrific true mental disorders.
Yeah. Okay, and now we're going to Peter. And Pete, it's similar, sort of. Peter asks, how do you stop fearing the fear and discomfort of anxiety? And that's his question.
Okay, and do I go first this time?
Yeah, you go first.
Just exposure. And again, I use many models in treating anxiety, and I think we might talk about that later in this podcast. But the attempt to escape from the discomfort of anxiety is the cause of anxiety. All avoidance of your fears causes and keeps the anxiety alive, and the answer to get over that kind of fear is to face your fears and see them disappear as quickly. For example, I mentioned the fellow I treated about a week ago for this TV series that we'll call Feeling Good TV or Feeling Good Video. I'm not sure what we're going to call it, but it'll be on YouTube and social media type sites.
Cool.
But this fellow was pretty certain that people were judging him negatively, and I told him, well, do you think I am? And he said, yes, and one of his negative thoughts is I won't be good enough for Professor Burns when he does his live work. And this was toward the end of our work, and I said, well, how could you find out how I'm feeling about you? And he kind of hedged and haws, and he finally got up to the idea that perhaps he could ask me, and it didn't take like a genius to come up with that. It is kind of an obvious answer. This guy is actually a kind of genius, but he couldn't believe it when I told him that I felt closer to him, knowing that he's been suffering from depression. And it just really touched him. And he had to confront his fear to ask me that question. He was trying to avoid the anxiety, and it meant so much to him. It meant a lot to me too,
Yeah, for
to
sure.
make that connection with him. And then I gave him for homework. I said, ask the people in your lab to tell me you've been struggling with depression and hiding it, and do they think less of you now that he's told them?
Oh.
And by Jove, he went out and he started doing it.
Oh my gosh.
And he emailed me back, and I mean, he was, I mean, beyond euphoria. He couldn't believe it that people were saying that the same thing I said. And he's been so lonely, this good-looking person, and how he ever got this idea that it's shameful or horrible to be depressed. I guess that's a stigma we have in our culture. But boy, it's been blowing his mind. And then he was listening to our podcasts on rejection practice.
Uh-huh.
You remember those,
Yep.
Rhonda?
Yep. Absolutely.
And so he was at the gym doing rock climbing and or wall climbing or something, and he saw this really attractive young lady, and I guess she was also climbing a wall. And he says, he just blurted out to confront his fear, and he said, I want you to know that I think you're really pretty.
Oh
And
my God, that's what he said to her?
yeah,
Just out of the clear blue sky?
and huh?
Out of the clear blue sky, he just said, I want you to know
Yeah. And she seemed charmed. And then he said, "Oh, but the reason I'm talking to you, I'm trying to, I have a terrible fear of rejection, and it would help me if you would reject me, please. So I'm trying to get over my fear."
Mm.
And then he emailed me. He says, "Dr. Burns, my rejection practice is a total failure because she refused to reject me." It said, but she would give me her phone number. So he's like a kid with a new toy, but he's not only over his anxiety, his social anxiety, but the thing he's been so afraid of is the greatest source of joy for him. And I call that the 200% cure. People
Yeah.
hate me for saying I have a cure for anxiety. And you know, they're trying to bust me because they hate it when people talk that, because it sounds so fakey, you know. And I said there's a 100% cure and a 200% cure. The 100% cure for a fear is that it disappears, goes to zero. The 200% cure is you fall in love with the very thing that you've been so afraid of.
Oh, I love that.
All
Well,
right.
I would just add that, just sort of a funny thing. I used to have a fear, actually probably came back after COVID, of driving over a high overpass.
Oh, I know.
And I was very motivated to come on this, to go to the Tuesday groups in person and to go on the Sunday hikes.
Yeah.
And so I had to drive over an overpass and bridges
Oh, terrifying.
to get to Stanford from where I live and to get to your house for the hikes. And one time I said to you, you know, I've overcome my fear of this overpass as long as I'm in the middle lane.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Do you remember what you said?
No.
You said that's really wise because you wouldn't want me to fall off either end of either side of the bridge.
Yeah.
And I thought,
Right.
oh my goodness.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You get that one either edge lane, and you know you're going to have some terrible catastrophe.
Yeah. And just
Yeah.
just the laughing about that situation made it easier to overcome too.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
laughter can help us so much. All right, next
Okay,
question on
here's
the same
Julian.
theme. Mhm.
Jillian, I'm sorry. How does cognitive therapy work to help reduce anxiety? And that's her short. Hi, David. I have questions about how using your methods helps people. I'm someone that uses an acceptance method for my anxiety with success. And throughout this journey, I've really been able to catch my mind trying to focus on the negative and trying to spiral into ruminating. With negative thoughts, how do your methods actually help? Does it start to change the way you think or make you automatically think in more of a positive way, eventually without having to challenge each thought? Do you have to believe the challenges to your negative thoughts in order for it to actually work? What if you believe the original negative thoughts more? Do you actually start viewing things in a more positive light? Kind regards, Jillian.
I'll give you first shot, and then I'll take second shot.
Okay. Well, I really think that a key component to the team therapy model is positive reframing. So even when I'm on my own and I support and train or coach or practice with my clients, when they have a negative thought or when they have a challenging feeling that's very painful, like a high level of anxiety, I want them to stop before they try to challenge the thought, before they look into the distortions of the thought, and really ask themselves, what is this feeling and what is the thought that's driving the feeling say about them that reflects beautiful aspects of who they are as a person, or speaks about their core values, or gives them some benefit. I don't want people to challenge their negative thoughts without first embracing the beauty of their symptoms. And then once they can see, yeah, these symptoms mean something very important to me, reflect really great qualities of me that I have, then you can start thinking maybe you want to reduce them, keep just enough to keep the positive aspects of the symptoms and eliminate the pain and the suffering they cause, and then start thinking about challenging them, seeing the distortions in them, and doing little methods with yourself, like asking yourself, is this how you would talk to a friend, the way you're talking to yourself? Or looking at the,
Beautiful.
yeah. Okay, that's my answer.
Okay, well, I think that's great. And by the way, that's the first thing I did after empathy with this young man that I treated, that I've been referring to. We did positive reframing, both his intense social anxiety and his depression, and he did a beautiful job with it. And that can be so helpful in reducing the shame that so many people feel when we're struggling with anxiety. I think anxiety, more than any other emotion practically, is associated with shame, thinking that you shouldn't be shy, you shouldn't be anxious, that don't let anyone know that you're anxious. uh, and yeah and we had Adam on just recently, who had, I guess, had been raised to believe that he wasn't supposed to have any negative emotions, and that he was supposed to be happy all the time. And I think that positive reframing made a huge impact on him as well. My answer to Jillian is it's a great question, and there's an awful lot in the podcast. If you go to the search function on my website, feelinggood.com, you'll find the search function there. And yeah, and you can type in anxiety or anxiety treatment, and you'll find all kinds of wonderful resources. You'll find many case studies of live therapy of people who were anxious, including my work with you, Rhonda, when you were socially anxious, when you were starting out, with the app, the host of the app, and thinking you weren't good enough. And then there's also there's a podcast showing the 4 models that I use when working with anxiety. There's the hidden emotion model, and there's a lot of podcasts on that, and that's huge. The anxious person often has some hidden conflict or problem right now in your life that you're kind of pushing out of conscious awareness, and that's what's actually fueling your anxiety. So that's a powerful treatment model. There's the motivational model, which you referred to, Rhonda, the working with the outcome and process resistance with positive reframing and the gentle ultimatum. There's the cognitive model, which you mentioned, writing down your negative thoughts, identifying the distortions in them, and then coming up with a positive thought that is both 100% true and that drastically lowers the belief in the negative thought. And that can be surprisingly helpful in anxiety, although a lot of people poo-poo it and think, oh, no, that would never work. And it does have limitations in the treatment of anxiety, but it can also be mind-blowingly effective for many people, as you'll see if you listen to the podcast with live treatment of people with all kinds of severe anxiety. And then, of course, the old favorite that we've talked about, exposure, both gradual exposure and flooding to confront your fear. And those are the tools that we use and the mechanisms that we use to bring about changes in anxiety. And I would say that for me and many of my students, I would say that we typically view anxiety as perhaps the easiest thing to deal with. I know I did a workshop all throughout Canada and the United States a few years back on trauma, which anxiety, PTSD, and other forms of anxiety after traumatic experience. And I don't think I've ever had a trauma patient who didn't respond very, very quickly, like after a single session or a single 2-hour therapy session. And I just love treating anxiety because although it has a reputation of being very hard to treat, in my experience, it's usually very easy and extremely rewarding to treat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's such a reward to see people have the freedom in their life to do things that they weren't able to do.
Yeah.
Before.
Yeah, it's a form of freedom. It's not only joy, but freedom to get over a form of anxiety. But once you're cured of it, you've got to keep up the exposure work on an ongoing basis, because otherwise the fear will come creeping back.
Absolutely. Okay, now we're going to do Sanjeev's question. And this was a long question, so I have edited it. And he asks, how do you give up wants, needs, and desires? Hello, David, Rhonda, and Fabrice. It was really nice to listen to Fabrice in episode 363 after a long gap. The topic Fabrice started is very special, about shoulds, wants, and needs. I've heard about this topic in bits and pieces by you in many podcasts, and also in your set of the podcast about the 4 self-deaths, death of the selves. I kept thinking a lot about this concept of want versus need, and if we're able to learn the technique to balance the want between wants versus needs, our lives will become much more stress-free and happy. But the penultimate question is that if we don't have desires, will life be dull and boring? Balancing the desires on the border between need and want is quite challenging. I hope my question is clear, and I'm eagerly looking forward to the discussion amongst yourself. And I did leave out, which I can add in if you want me to, his talk about Buddhism and the Holy Book of Hinduism and what they've said.
Well, why don't you summarize what they've said?
Well, just that Buddhist teachings say that the cause of every problem is desire. So, we need to live we need to live in a state of zero desires.
Yeah.
Which it seems kind of difficult, challenge, really hard. And the Holy Book of Hinduism, Gita, says that if the purpose of our desires is to fill a duty or to help someone, then desires are good and will bring happiness to the person who has them. But if the desire is selfish, then it's not good, basically.
I see. Well, I have a couple things to say, but I just forgot one of them. And it was fantastic. But I think that sometimes the Buddhist teachings, the Hindu teachings, the teachings of all religions are kind of metaphorical, and they're trying to teach us some deep ideas, and yet most religions or philosophical paths aren't very successful because people don't really get it. They form churches instead, or movements like Buddhism, and then they start to interpret things in very concrete ways with rules and things, and then you kind of miss the point of what was trying to be said. An example of that was I was giving a workshop in San Antonio years ago, and I might have told this story like 3 weeks ago. I hope not. But
I don't think
being
you did.
elderly and 3/4 demented now, I can't take responsibility for anything I say. But at any rate,
I will take responsibility. I don't think you've told this story before.
Okay,
recently.
good. But it was a 4-day intensive for a small group, maybe 25 or 30 people. And you, as you've heard on the podcasts, and as you hear in my workshops, I often make my own type Buddhist jokes, and I'll want to say something ridiculous in a workshop, And so I'll say, and as the Buddha said 2,500 years ago, stick it where the sun don't shine, or whatever it is I was wanting to say. And it's kind of funny, but there's a truth there too, that I'm trying to get an idea across when I do that, and in a humorous way. Well, at any rate, I was doing that in this workshop, but I don't really actually know anything about Buddhism. I think you and your husband do, Rhonda, but I've never really read anything about Buddhism or had any teachings on it or anything like that. I just make shit up. And which is actually what Buddha did, to be honest with you. But at any rate, I was making all these Buddhist jokes at this workshop, and this woman came up kind of very insecure at one of the breaks, and she was Asian, and she said, I wanted to tell you that I was raised as a Buddhist. And I thought, oh no, she's probably going to tear me to shreds now because I'm such a fake. And then she said, but our family, we had to give up Buddhism, and it was a big loss to us. I said, gosh, that's terrible. I'm so sorry to hear that. Why did you have to give up, your Buddhism? And she said, well, my mother, had been taught that you have to give up all desires to be in a state of bliss. But my mother was severely depressed, and so she thought that she must not have done a good job of giving up, desires and needs and things like that. So she felt like a failure. So we all gave up our Buddhism. And I said to her, oh, I understand what happened. That's very, very sad. But are you aware that there's two types of Buddhism? And she said, no, what are the two types? I said, well, there's low-level Buddhism and high-level Buddhism. And in low-level Buddhism, you have to give up wants and desires and things like that. That must be the type that, your mom had been raised in, low-level Buddhism. But in high-level Buddhism, you're allowed to have wants and desires. Again, you can even be depressed and still be a good Buddhist. In fact, you can be you can be anything.
Right.
And she said, "Oh, I didn't know that. That restores my faith. I'm a Buddhist again. Thank you so much." But anyway, I never forgot that. She was so sweet. But it's like we get these rules, and that, and then it kind of, I think, sometimes sadly ruins the point that the spiritual teachers were trying to make. I had a woman at my group in Philadelphia, Sister Sheila Flynn, and she was a Catholic nun, but she belonged to some part of the Catholic Church where you work in the world. And so she was wanting to become an addiction counselor and a mood counselor. So she came and worked in my clinic at the Presbyterian Medical Center there for a couple of years. And she was really a good friend and a beautiful person. But she would go every year to India and meditate in silence for 10 days. And once she even did it for a full month. And she said it was so hard for her and so painful. But she said this one year there was a Buddhist teacher, some very wise or some kind of guru, and so apparently he was quite famous and thought to be this great spiritual teacher. And people would stand in long lines for the chance to get up. And then when you got to the front of the line, he would be sitting there, surrounded by flowers or something. And then he would tell you could ask him a question. He would tell you what you have to do on your road to enlightenment. And this one fellow who'd been kind of obnoxious when he got to the front of the line, she'd noticed him in the spiritual camp they were in, and said, "Oh, Master, my problem is that I'm phony." And I'm trying to become more genuine and sincere. can you help me with that? What should I do? I really want to become more genuine. And then the wise master leaned into him and said, no, son, that's not your problem. And the fellow said, well, what is my problem? And he says, your problem is that you're not nearly phony enough yet. I thought that was wonderful.
Yeah.
It's really a cool notion.
Yeah. Well, that's neat.
Yeah.
You gave that woman spiritual advice as part of the support that you gave her.
Yeah. And I think there's a spiritual component to our work, absolutely, and at the core of Team CBT. But I try not to take it too seriously and do it kind of tongue in cheek a little bit, not out of disrespect, but because humor. I mean, that's one of the Buddhist forms of enlightenment called laughing enlightenment. When you start going into uncontrollable laughter, and when you see, see through the distortions in your thoughts and how your misery has been such an arbitrary thing throughout all your reincarnations, and it just strikes your funny bone. It's a form of enlightenment. It's also a form of recovery.
And then may I add just a little bit to that?
Yes, you can. You can add a lot if you like.
I mean, learning from Fabrice, and what he talked about is that, wants are personal preferences for things and experiences. Needs are essentially requirements for survival, like air and food and water. Desires are these strong longings and aspirations that go beyond our needs, but that add to a person's, happiness and fulfillment in their life. And you've always talked about that the root of should is scold. And so shoulds are like when we scold ourselves because we did or we didn't do something. And should is one of the cognitive distortions that we identify. And it's when you see a should or a hidden should within a negative thought, we want to kind of differentiate between shoulds that align with personal values or goals or, things that are beautiful about us or that give us some benefit. And then, or the or the shoulds where we're punishing and scolding ourselves. And then, work using a variety of team methods to align our shoulds, with our true desires and needs.
I love that. Beautifully stated, Rhonda. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Fabrice taught me that.
That's neat.
Yeah.
Very neat.
Okay, one last one for today, and that's from Dana. And Dana asks for help with the disarming technique. And she said, I would like to request that you, Dr. Burns, Rhonda, and Matt show your listeners how the disarming practice would sound with the following statements. Are you going to start that again? Or don't start that again? Why are you backpedaling?
Well, instead of reading them all, let's just take them one at a time, because these are all kind of accusatory questions, which are hidden criticisms. So do you want to be the antagonist or the one who's
I want to do the easy ones and give you the hard ones.
Okay, so are you going to start that again? Do you want to be
Yeah, that's the easier one. Can I be the you be the antagonist?
Okay. Okay, Ron, are you going to start that again?
Oh yeah, you're right. I am starting that again. And you're asking me and telling me don't start it again. And I'm imagining that you're feeling really irritated with me or even angry. Or maybe you're also bored or confused. And I'm feeling really regretful that I'm repeating myself and starting something again a second time or maybe even a third time. And I'm wondering if you could tell me more about what it is that I'm doing that is really annoying you, because I really like you. I really like working with you. And I'm really glad you brought it up so that we can talk about it. So can you tell me more about why it's so why it's so upsetting?
That's what grade do you give yourself on that?
I give myself a B+.
Okay, why a B+? As opposed to say an A or something?
Well, I did a little interpretation instead of just staying with, are you going to start that again?
Yeah, I thought it was an A- or a B+ for sure.
Okay, great.
But not a complete A, and I'm not quite sure why, but I didn't. She says I thought the disarming could have been stronger. You want to
Okay,
try a role reversal? I can't
sure.
say that I'll do any better.
David, are you going to start that again?
Oh, ouch. I'm feeling kind of zapped right now. And you're right. I was starting up on that something that's been very annoying to you, and I think it was kind of aggressive on my part,
Mm,
and I have to plead guilty as accused. You know, I love you to death, and uh, when we go round and round, it's painful for me, and
mm,
this is clearly I'm to blame for that right now. Uh, I'm ready to listen. Tell me kind of how you're feeling and how irritating it is when I start up on my preaching again, and because it's clearly disrespectful, and I'm finally kind of sad and ashamed, and I want to listen to tell me where you're at. Tell me how you're feeling right now and how you've been feeling when I've been annoying you like this.
mm. That was an 8 triple plus.
Oh, really? Oh, well, that's a relief. Why?
You know, mine felt formulaic. Maybe that's
Yeah,
why it was just a B plus, and yours felt very connecting.
yeah. Because I tried to embrace what seemed like the truth and the criticism. The criticism
Mm,
was given in a sarcastic way. But instead of kind of being evasive or defensive, I tried to embrace it.
mm-hmm.
And yours again, just to go with the five secrets was good. But what I was yearning to hear as the attacker was the strong disarm.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, should we try another one?
Sure.
You choose one. Say choose a tough one.
You're going back on your word.
Wow. And which role do you want?
Okay, I'll try again first.
Okay, Rhonda, you're going back on your word, damn it.
Ooh, you're right. I made a promise and I am breaking my promise to you. And ouch, I'm so embarrassed that I did that. You know, I feel uncomfortable from the beginning that I made that promise, and I'm feeling uncomfortable that I'm breaking it. And um, I really care about you so much and can understand, you know, your sense of betrayal and oh, you know, the sadness that comes with somebody breaking their word and breaking a promise and the hurt that goes along with that. And, you know, that's true. I have done that. And I'm wondering how if you could please tell me more about what you're feeling right now. You know, did I get it right that you are feeling hurt and angry? And, you know, I really want to, you know, you're very important to me and I really want to hear what this was like for you, that I'm back, I'm, breaking my promise.
Okay, what grade did you give yourself on that?
I think I'd give myself an A minus on that because it felt less formulaic and I really tried to embrace the breaking of a promise and what that would be like for someone.
I gave it an A. I thought it was
Oh,
excellent. I thought the disarming was good. I wouldn't have given it an A if you hadn't mentioned the anger at the end.
uh-huh.
And, I really want to hear about your hurt and anger. And you got that in there.
Okay.
And so I thought it was excellent. And if this person, Dana, wants to hear more of these, there's several more, but it's all the same theme well, several of them are questions and
Hmm.
some of them are criticisms. But I think if you wanted to hear, more authoritative or excellent responses, to take one of these and then give us a little bit of the context, because we have to make it up. One is, why are you backpedaling again? And the question was backpedaling in what area, give us a few details, because then we can do an even better job. And we'll have Matt back with us soon. And so if you give us some details on the other three, like you just want to rest on your laurels, and why are you doing this to me again? Give us the details that go along with it, and then we'll give you some more examples of how we might use the 5 secrets and the disarming technique.
But I'd also like to suggest that Dana send context or a few details, but then also I'd love to see Dana give it a try.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah,
and then
I love
give
that.
herself a grade, and then we can go back and forth.
Yeah.
With her.
That's right. Yeah. So you could even use the relationship journal, Dana, and describe the situation. Then what did the other person say, and what did you say next? And then we could evaluate it with the EAR questionnaire: empathy, assertiveness, and respect. And what impact will your response have on the other person? And will that make the situation better or worse? And then how might you use the 5 secrets to improve? Because people love these 5 secrets demo, and so we can do even better, I think, if you want to contact us again, and we'll take it to the next level if we can.
Okay, that's it for today.
All right. Well, how did we do before we turn off the machine? Sometimes we ask how we did, and then all the good stuff comes out.
I think we did really good. I think we did a good job. I think we did well.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I enjoyed today. I thought that they were good too. I thought we had pretty good energy, and we really appreciate people like Dana said. Thank you so much with 4 exclamation points. So we appreciate all of you so much.
Okay, until next time, you guys. See you later.
Bye-bye.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.